hell are you doing?
It's cool, I'm just looking.
It's too much machine for you.
I thought I'd post it on the internet, no?
Programs hacking programs. Why?
You know, like nunchuck skills, computer hacking skills.
Ever wonder why fund managers can't beat the S&P 500? Because they're sheep. And sheep get slaughtered.
That I love. I absolutely love. I want it. It's everything.
They thought that search engines were a map of what people were thinking, but actually they were a map of how people were thinking.
Let the hacking begin.
So I guess we'll just, give a, brief overview. So I'm Taylor. I've been working on Psi options since November, December, and it really started taking off after we won the Serum and Solana Hackathon. I've been working on some Solana development for the last 8 months or so, since summer of 2020.
Yeah, similar boat. Solana's very new. It takes some time to get up to speed, but there's been a lot of new developments that make developing on Serum and Solana a lot better. Unfortunately, we won't touch on Anchor in this workshop, but I highly recommend you check it out. Unfortunately, we were developing before Anchor came out. It's also supported by the team who developed Serum, but if you're getting into Solana development, you should definitely check out that project, as it will help you get up to speed a lot quicker.
So in this workshop, we'll probably we'll go over some high level stuff about how Serum is architected, kind of what we've learned as we've developed on top of it or integrated with it. Some issues we ran into, to hopefully help you guys in the broader community not run into the same issues and kind of dampen that learning curve. So First thing we want to kind of go over is some different, Serum account types that are important when it comes to placing orders and high touch functionality. So this is the MarketState structure. I'd say probably, this is where most of the metadata of the market is. So I don't know if you guys can see my cursor, but you'll see this bids and asks here and this U64. This is really just, oh nice. This really is just showing that here is housed the bids and ask address of where those the buffer for the bids and asks are stored. Pretty much this just holds most metadata where pointers to other accounts and data structures that you can find actually data relating to the functionality of the market. I don't know, Tom, if you have anything to add.
Sorry, I was totally muted there and then annotated.
Nice.
The own address is actually the actual address that the Serum market lives at. Every account on Solana has its own address, and accounts are kind of like where you store all your data. So this MarketState account, like Taylor said, holds all the metadata for a specific Serum market. And you'll see we have the PC mint and the coin mint, and in Serum terms, the coin mint is the actual SPL token mint that you are trading. So let's just say if we're looking at a wrapped BTC over USDC market, the coin mint is the wrapped BTC mint. And then the PC mint, actually the PC stands for price currency. So it's really what is actually being denoted. That would be the USDC. You'll see in some of Serum's client side code base that they use like quote, and a lot of other exchanges will use the term quote asset. But PC is another term for that. But yeah, I mean, go ahead, Ty.
I was going to say, a couple other things to note is just, important addresses is the PC vault and the coin vault. And that's where, when you're actually creating a market and depositing funds into Serum, those are the addresses of the pools of where they're actually be stored. Anything else to add on for this object, Tommy?
No, I think we'll get deeper once we get to the orders.
Oops, sorry. So when it comes to placing an order, the new order V3 args that you use, there's actually there's an older version of this that has now been deprecated. So definitely make sure you're using the V3 arguments rather than the V1. What's probably most important is this new order instruction V3. That's where you're going to see that you're going to put your side, whether you're buying or selling, your limit price, which is going to be, the price denoted in that PC coin. And that will basically say where on the order book it's going to be placed. Or if it's over, if you're trying to post a bid and it's, over the lowest ask, it'll essentially act like a market order.
And then the other thing to really note is the order type too. That's where you post, or that's where you decide, is it a post order? Is it they also have IOC, so it's immediate or cancel. Just basically when you're sending the order, it either matches something or it doesn't actually get listed on the order book.
And then you have over here in some of these other arguments, you'll see a lot of the same variables that you did in the market state. And the Serum libraries will take care of most of that for you. So you really don't, when you're writing your code, you actually don't have to worry about these too much. So really over on the right side, the new order instruction V3 is the most important.
And then the other major account to really note is OpenOrders. And so an OpenOrders account has an owner, and this owner is the person who's placing the order. And so this is how Serum knows who's placed what orders. And this is where you have this array of all these orders. Sorry, this is hard to circle.
Sanitation. So other important pieces of this to note are these native coin free, native coin total, native PC free, and native PC total. What these values represent is the amount of assets that the owner has put into the respective vaults. And so the total is the total amount. The free is the amount that is not locked up in existing orders. So anything that's not locked up in an outstanding order, you can perform what's called a settlement. So you can settle those funds and actually pull them back out of the vault and put them back into the originating SPL or the originating address that sent them in. And so that's a pretty important thing to note, because if you're writing your own UI and building your own UX, you may want to settle those funds immediately after making the order, or you may want to decide to let the user settle them at some other point in the future. But we can talk a bit more about that in a few slides. Anything else, Tom?
No, I think that covers it.
So now we want to talk a little bit about client development.
I guess before we jump into that, there's a lot more accounts on the actual Serum decks, and it's worth going through them if you're trying to get a deeper understanding of how the DEX actually functions. But as we go through some of these client-side functions, they take a lot of the heavy lifting. They do a lot of the heavy lifting for you. So this makePlaceOrder transaction is going to be your best friend when trying to just place an order. It it has a bunch of other functionality inside of it where it actually finds the open orders account for the owner that is passed in. So this owner right here, it checks, is there an open order account for this owner already? And if not, then create one. I mean, Taylor, maybe you want to click on this actual link and show it. But
can I? Every time I click, it just, oh, there you go. Can you see?
Yeah. So you'll see that this, like, you don't even have to really think about the open orders account because this already handles it for you, where it makes a request to the Solana blockchain for that Serum market and finds whether there's open orders accounts. And if there's not one, then it actually creates an open order account right here. So it adds a new instruction to the transaction that is creating an open orders account for the user or the owner if they don't have one. And it also handles like getting the fees account to give the fee discount since Serum has a tiered fees based on how much Serum you hold. So this instruction takes care of all of that stuff for you. So it makes it very simple to actually place an order.
Should we go back to the slides? Or you want to go through this a little bit more?
No, I mean, there's a lot of benefit to doing this. It just takes a lot. It takes most of the work out of it, but you can get improved. You could get potentially improved transactions or putting more instructions into a transaction if you actually just use the make place instruction and then merge the instructions how you wanted to.
I feel like we can talk a little bit more about why you might want to do that later. Anything else, Tom? Oh, you're on the phone. Sorry. So yeah, I mean, the main important things here are similar to those new order V3 ARGs that we spoke about. You're going to put in the owner address, which will be your Solana address. You'll put in the side whether you're trying to buy or sell, the price, which would essentially be the limit price, order type, which is defaulting to limit. The client ID, you don't need to worry about that too much. That's more, I'm pretty sure that's more about how the Serum GUIs can take part of the transaction fees. And then, the open order address, key, open order accounts, and fee discounts and fee rates. So like I mentioned, with those free versus total coins and PC, you can decide whether to settle your funds or not settle your funds. So that's one decision that we had to make at Sci Options is, do we want the user to have to think about settling their funds every time? Or do we want to wrap that into the same transaction as them actually making their order? We ended up deciding to let the users settle their funds at a later time and show them what funds they have unsettled. And the reasoning for that is if we were to put it into every single transaction that the user were to make in order to, trade, then each trade that is made ends up costing them more in transaction fees. So it's just like a minor optimization versus a user experience trade-off. So just one thing to think about that, when you're deciding how to compose your instructions and compose your transactions, you're going to have a lot of UI, UX trade-offs versus efficiency and things like that. Tom, you want to talk about error codes?
Yeah. Error codes in Solana programs are typically, most have followed a pattern where there's an errors.rs file and then there's an enumeration of errors. And so you kind of have to take the hex code that is given to you and look up an actual error. That's the actual DEX error at the top. Taylor, I don't know if you want to just like pull open GitHub and show the errors.rs file.
Let me see if I can just move my, let me unpresent. There you go. Oh, wait, this is ours. Let me pull up. Oh, CMX. Okay, so here's the DEX error codes that Tommy was talking about for Serum. I don't know, Tom, if you want to continue.
Yeah. So you'll get an error code, and it might be like a hexadecimal 20, and that basically denotes a coin mint uninitialized. Oh, that's weird. And so it's all pretty self-explanatory. Once you actually like get an error code, you just go to the errors file and like look up which one it actually is based on the numbers, right? 10, 11, 12. Are my like annotations all over the place for you?
No, they look fine.
Okay. And so those are all very self-explanatory. It's a very common pattern. But then if you scroll down to an actual assertion error, let
me go to the actual assertion error. It's up here.
So Serum has this cool pattern where they'll run an assertion inside the code, and you'll get a hexadecimal error response, but it actually has the file ID and then the line number. So you get this like crazy number, and you're just like, that's not part of the enumeration or something. So, but it actually really just denotes the file and line number. So you can go in and see exactly what assertion failed.
So here you can see the files. So these are what they map to. So if it's in the state RS file, it's going to be state equals 1. If it's in the matching RS 2, and so on. But yeah, I mean, I think this is a really cool pattern. I haven't seen it used anywhere else yet, but you know, I'm sure when it comes to errors that you might see in a bunch of different places, I think that's where this pattern like really shines. So I imagine like the larger programs that will have you know, more reused errors will probably hopefully end up using a pattern similar to this.
Yeah, that's a really good point. There's a lot of generic program errors that come with the Solana program crate, and it can get really confusing if you end up having 20 different places where there could be an invalid account data error, and you're sending multiple instructions in one transaction or something like that, and you know, trying to debug exactly where that went, like where that invalid account error came from. I think that's where the assertion like really can really shine.
So know your error types. So yeah, here we have like a bunch of different considerations that we'll kind of just talk through. One thing to note that's been kind of happening a lot with the Solana ecosystem is RPC nodes kind of getting bombarded. And an important piece of that is that you can do a couple different things when you're trying to read on-chain data. You can fetch it directly by making an RPC call, or you can also listen to a specific address for whenever that account's data changes. But you need to note that when you're listening to the account change, there's only a certain number, and I believe it's 100,000 accounts that an RPC node can concurrent listeners that an RPC node can handle. So if your programmer or if your front end ends up listening to 20,000 per instance, you're gonna burn out your RPCs pretty fast. So you need to be cognizant of how many accounts you're listening to at any given moment in time. If you want your RPC nodes to scale well, to scale across clients. I don't know, Tom, do you have anything to add for that? Should I show anything for that?
No, it hard to show that one without testing. Cool.
So another consideration is large accounts and bandwidth usage. So if you're listening to an on-account change, anytime a single byte changes, that entire account's data is going to be sent to the listener. So one thing to note with Serum is that the fills accounts is 1 megabyte. So even if one thing changes, 1 byte changes, I don't know why 1 byte would change, but hypothetically, if a single byte changed, it's going to send an entire megabyte every single time. And so because that fills account changes every time a trade is made for that market, it's a high frequency event that's going to happen a ton. So you don't really want to listen to it. Rather, you want to pull it. And that's something I've talked about with some of the Serum devs as well. It'll just save bandwidth and resources.
One thing that kind of got us when we were developing was this self-trade and matching behavior. I don't know if Taylor, if you have this set up to actually show it, but when you're trying to develop locally and you're trying to play both sides of the market, you need to have 2 different accounts, so that way you can place place buys under one account. And then Taylor, if you want to show them quickly like how to change accounts in Solid, if you have that set up.
Yeah, so I was trying to see if I was running into it. I'm not sure if I placed that order or not. But here.
Yeah, you basically need to have separate accounts because if you try to write the buys and the sells and try to have the orders match and exchange, the Serum Dex actually handles self-matching. So it basically would just cancel your orders and remove the order from the order book. So it got me when I wasn't even thinking about that case and was trying to do bids and asks on my own, and things weren't moving. But it makes sense.
I think I just hit it because I'm pretty sure I wrote one of these. But yeah.
So if you're going to be playing the order book against yourself, you need to have 2 different addresses that you're writing them from. Another thing that really got us stuck for a while is accounting for fees. So Taylor, I don't know if you want to go back to that, but we have a market order.
You want me to go show the placing order?
Yeah. So we have a market. We have the ability to do a market, which allows you to buy at the you're buying at the lowest ask. And it does in a immediate or a fill or kill kind of does a fill or kill order. But what was happening is the Serum client code wasn't accounting for fees in itself. So even though that market order was put in at 55 USDC, the fees that Serum charged actually made it so it wouldn't be able to match because there wasn't sufficient funds. So it's just one thing to consider if you're trying to implement a market order. You have to make sure that you account for fees, because I don't think that PR is actually in the Serum code yet.
And then kind of not necessarily just a Serum thing, but one bug, it's not really a bug, it's more of like a build process issue that really got us, was the Buffer package version we're using. So the browser, Buffer is a Node.js API, and it's not supported by the browser. So we use a polyfill for it. And what was happening was every different, like for each package that we had that used the Buffer library or the Buffer polyfill as a dependency, it used its own specific version for it. And so with these differing versions, we kept having issues where the instances wouldn't wouldn't match or the types weren't working. And so that was something that we ran into with Webpack. So that's just something to consider when you're building a client, especially if you're building for a browser. If you're building for a server or a Node.js environment, it's not as important. But yeah, if you're building any user-facing application, definitely be aware of your dependencies.
Taylor, we had a question about I think Nubility, if I'm saying that right, said, I heard there were some RPC nodes jammed. What is the best way to resolve that with traffic hits? So kind of, as we've seen with DevNet and we've seen with the mainnet, as Solana is still ramping up and it's got a ton of attention recently, there were a ton of issues with user interfaces relying on these public RPC nodes and these RPC nodes had to start rate limiting. I think, Taylor, maybe you want to show what the unique solution that we handled for the user interface.
Which aspect are you referring to?
Our actual the service worker on the client side code. So there's
there's my front end.
So what happens when we have when the RPC node is failing and is trying to say you have too many requests of 429, it will also tell you have CORS errors. So you might see CORS errors, but it's actually really just stemming from a bad response because you've been sending too many requests to the RPC node. And this happens to us as we're trying to load a bunch of different market data for our options chains. Right, we're loading Serum data for 12 different markets all at once. And shout out to our team member contributor, BitSushi, for the easy and unique, innovative, I guess, fix of the problem is we just put in a service worker actually that runs a request queue. And so that actually throttles the requests we're making to the RPC node, and that way we can stay within those within the rate limiting. And we don't have to change any application code if we do it that way. So the Solana client side code actually has throttling built into it. But because the RPC nodes throw a bad response with the CORS error, the throttling actually doesn't, it skips over the throttling and the requests are still made. So you kind of have to roll your own for now.
Cool. Is there any other questions? Did that answer the question, or is there anything else about it?
Same person. What's the best solution for better prepared with RPC node scale up?
So there's starting to be a few different players that are building out RPC pools. So I would definitely reach out to the Solana community for that. Reach out in their Discord, and they'll be able to point you to the right groups that are working on those. Aside from that, right, because that's a costly solution. Aside from that, I would recommend managing your connections and managing how much data you're fetching. So make sure you're not, limit the amount. If you're integrating with Serum, try to limit the amount of markets that you're pulling from. Try to limit the amount of things that you're doing on a screen. So that's why I think it's important to try and break down functionality into different screens rather than loading a ton of different components that pull in a bunch of data from different accounts all on the same screen. You're just gonna run into problems. I don't know if you have anything to add to that, Tom.
No, it covers it.
Yeah. And then that also goes back to the same thing of not just the amount of data you're fetching, but like I mentioned before, if you are connecting, if you are using the on program account change where it adds a listener, make sure you're unsubscribing those listeners when you unmount components and different things like that. Like, use best practices so that way you don't have your RPC nodes run out of listener capacity and whatnot.
Taylor, can you Command plus to just zoom in to make it a little bit easier to see?
That doesn't zoom in for me. I don't know how to. I don't know. I need to change my settings if I want to zoom in.
Or just be under view, maybe.
I don't know. Let me see. Oh, there you go. Oh, it's Command equals. That's weird. Wait, no, that's literally what I clicked. That's not the command. All right. Anywho, I hope that's better.
Maybe one more. Nice.
Good. Cool. All right. Any other questions? Anything on that?
No, that was. I think that covered the questions so far.
Cool. Appreciate the questions, guys. And then, so another thing that we wanted to talk about is writing composable instructions. So within each transaction on Solana, you could pack in, a fair amount of, you can pack in multiple instructions. So like if you were creating a Serum trade, placing an order, you'll actually end up making a ton of different. You might be making instructions that will create accounts, then place the order and whatnot, like in that order, because you'll need to have the accounts to receive the different tokens and whatnot before you actually make that order. And so what we've done to help our client is break down different instructions into their own reusable functions that just really return the instruction. So here's a good example of one where anytime we want to create an associated token account instruction, we just call this function, it returns the instruction, and then we can just use that and, place a bunch of those instructions into the same transaction. And so we've tried to do that for as many things as possible. That makes your code more reusable. Also makes it so that way you can speed up transactions by, putting as many different instructions into the same transaction as possible, which ends up making a better user experience. Tom, anything you think I should, any other pieces you think I should show for that?
No, I think maybe unless you wanted to show like in our actual code base, in the actual product, this allows you to write, to take some of that functionality and put it into the client side. So right now our program allows you to mint one option, like per instruction. So to write 50 options all at once, you need to actually just pack 50 instructions into a transaction. So it gives the user the same feel of writing 50 options in one go, but it's really you're separating into multiple instructions. So the composable instructions is critical if you want to have a quality user experience without them having to click approve a million times, depending on what you're trying to do.
And yeah, I mean, this is a slightly different example, but here, when someone is placing a buy order, if they don't have the option, if they don't have an account for that option token, we have to create it before they can actually place the buy order. So we check for that key. If they don't have it, we create the associated token account from this function here. And then we add that to the transaction, and then add the place order instruction to that same transaction afterwards. And then we can actually send the transaction.
Taylor, we had another question. He said, sorry if this is a silly question. You also mentioned that the two accounts to handle buy and sell Could you elaborate a bit more on how do they interact with the user wallet? So I think we're asking about actually placing the need to actually place orders. When trying to play both sides of the market by yourself. So Taylor, could you show? Is
it that, or is it about the accounts when you're settling? Sorry, I don't have the question up in front of me.
It says the two accounts to handle buy and sell. Could you elaborate a bit more on how they interact with the user wallet? The question I think is regarding us mentioning you need to have two accounts because of the self trade.
Oh, okay. Do you want to elaborate more on that?
If you could just pull up Solid. So when I talk about having two accounts, I really just mean you have, let me get my annotation up. You have this like one wallet. This is your your owner address. And then you have another one so that you can easily switch to. And you notice that like this has a different Solana address to it. So that allows you to interact with your same local development order book, but acting as two totally different users. And so that's needed to actually trade across two different accounts. If all of the orders buy and sell were coming from just this one address, then Serum would cancel the orders when there's a match. So
I think I can show that. I believe I made this sell order, so I believe it should error if I try to buy it or not. Maybe I didn't make it.
It just cancels the order. Like the Serum program says that like everything's fine, but it just cancels the actual order. So for things to actually move, to actually see the assets move from one wallet address to the other, you have to be using two different addresses. So I would just show like how you switch, like making.
That's weird. So if I wanted to add a new account, testing 3, now I have a fresh account that I could use to test against other interactions with other accounts where it won't be an issue.
Right.
But I don't know. I actually didn't run into that self-trade issue there. I'm not sure if something changed.
The program returns fine. It's just the assets don't move and you can't actually see what's going on.
Oh. Even more oblivious.
Exactly.
Any other questions before we get into the last consideration?
No.
Okay, so we talked about writing composable rule instructions and how it's important. So you can, create accounts before placing an order. As Tommy mentioned, one thing we do is in our instructions when you're minting an option, it's one option per instruction. And so what we do to make it a better user experience is we pack in, many different mint instructions into the same transaction. However, there are transaction limits with how big the transaction could be based on the size of bytes. So what we found is we, bumped up against that upper limit, and then we decide to chunk up the instructions across multiple transactions when we run into that. Now that can be changed on a couple different ways. You can change it on the client and chunk it up like we did. That way you don't have to make changes to your protocol. Or you could try to make changes at the protocol level and pack in, those multiple things that you're doing into, a single instruction. So for us, all we'd have to do is modify that mint instruction so that way it can mint multiple options at the same time rather than just a single option. So it's kind of a decision up to the developer.
Yeah. Cool. I mean, that kind of covers like what we wanted to just like share from our experience. I don't. If anyone has any other questions, please we'll stick around for a little bit. Please feel free. Someone from the Chinese community said, can we replace the official Solana nodes with Serum nodes? I think if that question is regarding the URLs, Serum does have a URL and API for their RPC node, and they are interchangeable. But given on how much traffic is going to either one, like you could have issues. No matter what, you're going to have a rate limit.
Yeah, both of them will rate limit you. So like at the end of the day, like if you're planning on scaling up, like so for development, completely fine to use either one. But as you decide to go to production, and if you expect to have a lot of traffic, you know, I'd highly recommend going with a private RPC pool. It just that way you don't have to get rate limited, and you can scale up as needed. You know, it's just going to be a bit more costly.
Cool.
All right. Yes. Thank you, guys. I think Tommy, you have wonderful Chinese reading skill. I'm
translated that.
Yeah, maybe the next time you can do a Chinese demo here. There'll be I think there'll be more Chinese developers coming, and they'll be great. So I think you guys have addressed most of the questions from both of the channels. So from the community side, I would like to add one more question: is what could Serum support the developer community, and do you have a idea list, or how can you support the Hackathon hackers and build up a product that is based on Serum or on top of Serum?
Yeah, I mean, are you asking, like, anyone can join our Discord and ask us questions from here on out? Like, we're happy to help. We're not entering the hackathon. We're still heads down on Sci options. But we're happy to mentor and add, any help we can to people who are trying to get up and running or get stuck.
Just to clarify, if you join the Sci options Discord and post in Solana season devs, that's where we'll probably respond the most. We're not as active in the Serum and Solana Discords just because, we have our own community that we're building and working on. We're happy to help any project, answer any questions, even take a look at some of their code to, make sure you guys have, the community has the best success for this, Solana season hackathon.
Great. Yeah, so thank you guys for sharing. And for developers, if you have any further questions, please join the Discord and contact Tommy and Taylor and ask any questions. And also, I think it's a good idea to get involved in Serum development, and I think Serum is one of the most important projects in the Solana ecosystem right now. Thank you again, Taylor and Tommy, for introducing Serum and sharing with the community. So we will update the progress of the hackathons, and I think there will be a lot of interesting developers and interesting projects coming out from the hackathon. We will invite hackathon teams to demonstrate their ideas and their projects, their builds very soon after the submission channel is open. So I think we're good today, and thank you guys for sharing.
Well, thanks for having us.
Bye-bye.
Bye, guys.
Bye.